Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to everyone's favorite game show, What is Gear 5? Let's take a look at the answers. Is Gear 5 A, Gear 4 Luffy on steroids, B, Super Saiyan Luffy, or C, Alpha Too Late 17 in disguise? Unfortunately everyone, the answer is D. I'm not asking what Gear 5 is, I'm going to ask when Gear 5 is. I'm so sorry, but hey, for a nice consolation prize, you get a 7-minute video starring this guy. Won't that be exciting?
Gear 5 is what many call the last power-up for Luffy. As soon as Gear 4 was shown, everyone was speculating as to what the next gear power would be. From Alpha Too Late 17 to One World HD, every possible power and aspect of Gear 5 was talked about. At this point, it looks like a wait-in game in order to see who got it mostly right. So am I bringing anything new to the table? Well, I could put Gear 5 Luffy fan art on the table. I think that counts. Well, instead of calling that accomplishment the highlight of this video, let's talk about when Gear 5 could come into the series, instead of asking how or what it is. I know a lot of people are excited about Luffy reaching a final form in order to take on the best of the best, but no one's really sure when this power boost could happen, even me. Although I could get an interview with Oda to get some answers, and then afterwards ask him when he's killing off Spandam so my soul can finally rest in peace. Or you know, I could just do it right now.
Shoot him! Shoot him!
So let's not waste any more time. Let's try and figure out when Gear 5 could be introduced. So in order to tackle this theory, we need to set up a basic timeline for the rest of the series. So as of this video, we are currently in the Big Mom arc. Now the most common timeline could be summed up as this: the Big Mom arc, followed by the Kaito arc, followed by possibly a Shanks and Blackbeard arc, and ends with the final war of the series, also believed to be called the Throne Wars, where all the pirates face off against the world government and the Marines in the ultimate showdown of ultimate destiny. Now I know that another option is that the final war focuses on Blackbeard instead of the government. I don't know though. By the end of the series, Luffy has to deal with a corrupt system that has plagued the world for centuries. Blackbeard has been a very personal enemy for Luffy, but I feel like defeating Blackbeard first will then lead Luffy to the position of preparing everyone for the government. After all, if this timeline comes true, then Luffy will defeat all the Yonko and essentially become the king of the pirates, something the government can no longer ignore, and then the true final war begins. So let's stick with this timeline, where the Yonko go down first, followed by the Marines. Now comes the billion-belly question: when will Luffy use Gear 5? Let's start by narrowing our choices down. So the first option to go is the Big Mom arc. I don't think we will see Luffy have a new power-up for the first Yonko he faces. After all, we just saw Gear 4 thanks to Doflamingo. If Luffy has access to Gear 5 now, then why didn't he use that form against Doflamingo? The climax of that arc focused on a time limit. So if Luffy had Gear 5 then boom! He could have just ended the fight faster. So by that logic, the only possible reasons Luffy didn't use Gear 5 against Doflamingo was either because of an unforeseen risk at the time, or Luffy just didn't have Gear 5 during the arc. This also makes sense from a storytelling perspective because we haven't seen everything Gear 4 can do yet. When Luffy trained with Rayleigh, we got foreshadowing that Luffy has attacks that are either on par or even stronger than his King Kong gun, an attack that destroyed Doflamingo's ultimate offense and defense in an instant. I like to call this the Saitama effect, where like Saitama, Luffy's Gear 4 has attacks that he uses normally, but if the situation calls for it, they can both up their game with a series of more powerful attacks. It wouldn't make sense for Luffy to go into Gear 5 now when he hasn't shown us everything Gear 4 has to offer, so I just can't imagine seeing this new power-up being in the Big Mom arc. And on that note, let's move on to the Kaito arc. Now this is the arc where I think Luffy will show us the full range of Gear 4's normal and super attacks. Kaito is supposed to be one of the strongest beings in the entire world. In fact, he's so strong, Oda once said that even he wasn't sure how Luffy would beat Kaito when he first appeared. Now, will I dive into every detail on how Luffy could do it? No, that theory is for another day. but I think the simplest explanation could be that along with his crew, Law, and the Straw Hat fleet, they might be able to stop Kaido. Luffy could be the heavy hitter with his Gear 4 arsenal, while everyone else can offer support, be it during the fight or outside of it. Kaido's forces were already weakened thanks to beating Doflamingo, so the next steps in the Luffy-Law alliance will probably focus on weakening the Yonko more, so that he can actually be defeated. Who knows, we might even get Kid in his alliance to help out since the Supernovas have a common enemy in Kaido. But ultimately, Luffy's Gear 4 will likely be at its maximum potential during this fight. So now we move on to the Shanks and Blackbeard arc. I decided that in the timeline, Shanks will be involved against the fight with Blackbeard. I know that Luffy wants to see Shanks last to prove his mark of piracy, but I have the feeling Blackbeard will get in the way of that. By the time this arc comes around, Blackbeard will probably be one of the greatest powers around, a threat too immediate and great to simply ignore. I have another theory on this subject that I hope we can explain in the future with this traitor to the Kaido regime, but as of right now, Blackbeard, Luffy, and Shanks will likely confront each other, leading to a long-awaited showdown. This might also be when Dragon finally meets Luffy, since it looks like he and Blackbeard have a score to settle. Well, on another hand, it could be Sabo instead of Blackbeard, but let's go back to Gear 5. Could this be the arc where Luffy shows his final transformation? I think it might be. It could be a nice way for Luffy to show Blackbeard how much power Luffy truly has. Blackbeard was always impressed by Luffy, but he always continued to underestimate Luffy as well. It could be a nice send-off to a grudge match that, in the One Piece world, was literally years in the making. Luffy could also use Gear 5 out of anger against Blackbeard since he's that big of a threat to him. Again, I don't know how Luffy will use or achieve Gear 5, but this arc in the future might be an appropriate time for Luffy to finally show his full, unrestrained power. Now it leaves us with one arc left, the final war against the government and the Marines. The opponents would most likely be the full power of Cypher Pol, high-ranking government officials, the entirety of the Marines, and quite possibly the Gorosei as well. No pressure. So if Luffy doesn't use Gear 5 during the Blackbeard arc, then it only makes sense that Luffy uses it here. After all, he could be saving the best transformation for last. And by last, I mean Akainu. I already talked about how dangerously powerful Akainu was before, and how large of a gap in power he has compared to most characters. So if there was any kind of power-up that might make a dent in Akainu at long last, it would most likely be Gear 5. I don't even have much more to say on the subject. It seems clear that Luffy will have one more transformation during the series, so it's entirely possible that Oda is saving the ultimate transformation until it's time for that ultimate showdown of ultimate destiny. And with that, this theory is officially finished. So in my belief, I think Gear 5 is being saved until either Luffy deals with Blackbeard or until the final war starts. What Gear 5 is or how it'll happen is a topic I don't find myself covering anytime soon. Unless there's demand for it, I think I'll leave it to the professionals. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and be sure to check the description since all credits in terms of footage and music used are listed in there. And I will see all of you legends in the next video. Take care.